we talked about directional force as a line. When you start dealing with structure, and there's this concept of appeal. It's a big conversation in the animation industry. I'm going to try to define it to you from a drawing standpoint. Is structure ends up being defined through a straight line, and the curve is force, right? Combined, what those two guys do, instead of lines, what you start thinking about is shapes, right? So now we have this shape. So instead of the line being a force, the shape is a force. That's a big jump. This is basically the abstraction of appealing design, right? So what happens is, very abstractly speaking, and you'll see how this starts to get manipulated, you'd have all these directional curves of force, right, that are creating rhythm, and you'd have straights, their opposing sides for structure. You end up with what looks like these like half pie or like cut lemon slice shapes. And again, you'll see that in my first book, or the second one I think does a really great job of explaining this, also in color. And you'll see how like one shape moves into another shape, moves into another shape. Now, the human body isn't created of straights and curves. It's more pliable than that. But to give you an example, let's say I were to draw an upper body, right? All right, so I hope what you see is, I've already abstracted it into straights and curves and created out of shapes. Here, just to give you a sense of what it is that I just drew there. This is the top of the neck, and this is the head, and this is, let's say, the back of the cranium, and here's an ear, and here'd be another ear, right? And this is the back of the head, okay? So here's a shoulder, here's the other shoulder, okay? So we're looking at somebody's back in like a slight three-quarter view. So look at how many different straight to curves I've created in here. This is actually a straight to curve. That's number one. Then we have a second straight to curve, which is the entire back, right? I have this straight representing the right edge of the chest, right? So there's number two. We also have the one that's only on the right side, which is number three. I can keep going with this. I'm seeing these as shapes. I even did it when I drew for you the neck, right? See right there is a straight to curve also. Right, so you can see everything in here is constructed off a straight to curve design, and they all fit within to one another. So my point is, it's not always a perfect straight and a perfect curve. The curve is really important because the curve is your directional force, right? It's telling you, and you're following how force is moving from one side of the body to the next. It's the straight side that's not always straight. It's typically also curved, but it's a weaker curve. It sort of represents abstractly the concept of, this is the structure of the body. I need this to balance it out against the softness of and aggressiveness of the fluidity in the figure, in the forms. So, you'll have something that looks like what I drew here. It's almost more like this. Right? It's not perfectly straight, but it is almost straight, and it's less curved than the curve of force itself is. So you end up with that. And like I said, it ends up being a big arrow itself, right? And it'll lead itself, it's like a triangle, right? Like a bent triangle. From one bent triangle to another bent triangle to another bent triangle in the body. And that is its abstraction. And again, we're going to actually now try to take this concept and bring it over to real anatomy. So the rules to making sure that you have force, what you don't want to do is you don't want this, which is, as I just described, like a tube, right? Just parallel. You don't want this, and you don't want this. These are the don'ts. They're the don'ts because, remember, force was asymmetry, right? We had asymmetry of moving from left to right to left to right, right? That's what's creating force and allows force to be rhythmic and bounce back and forth, right? You're looking for rhythm, and rhythm is doing this. Right? It's like angling from one directional force to the next directional force and so on. These three shapes, although they're created out of forceful lines, they create shapes that are not forceful. This goes perfectly straight up and down. There's no asymmetry or rhythm. This shape, number two, force moves in symmetrically again, equally on both sides, right? So force basically like tries to come in here and then just gets evened out, becomes straight and gets pinched in there. On this one, force, if it is even into this shape, it's basically trapped at the top and trapped at the bottom. There's no way for it to basically come out of this shape. This number three also is I have to say, you see all the time, right? Because I know I did this when I was in like middle school. You draw like muscle guys, and the muscle guys all look like this. Here's the guy's face, right? And this is his arm, right? And it doesn't look right. You don't know why it doesn't look right, but you draw these muscles as almost like spheres, right? And it's because our anatomy, first of all, isn't built like that, because our anatomy is much more fluid and rhythmic than that type of musculature. So that's why this stuff's not working. Symmetry kills force. You're looking for asymmetry, right? Asymmetry equals force.